ready to go, or?
Yeah.
Okay. The one reading, the one which was most widely discussed probably in the social sciences in this area, Saskia Sassen's book. She did it before she came here. She rewrote it, got it a little bit sharper with some students here. It's on 3 cities, New York, London, and Tokyo, that were global cities. And the question is, why and how are they global, and what makes them work, and how and why are they different from other places? So we had, I don't know if we have anything that we can play with. Is it, do we just have the same thing as last time?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe never mind. We'll just hold this up to you, and if we've got this, I'll put this closer to the camera so people may see a little bit. The simple point is, there are 4 lines, or four levels of analysis, 4 ways of interpreting what the variables are, which she talked about. So her simple model we're going to start with, and then elaborate that today. It is globalization leads to more inequality. G leads to I. Globalization leads to inequality. And she focuses on New York, and especially Wall Street. And she was married then to a Wall Street banker, and drew a little bit. She didn't say that in the book, but sort of said Wall Street does this and so forth. And I want to elaborate that dynamics, as well as some of I'll run through some of these here before I go into that, let's have some discussion with you. What was her basic argument? Why did that hold, or what are global cities? Why are they important? I mean, she made a big splash in the world. She was continually on airplanes, going to conferences, etc. What are global cities? Why do they matter? And why do they work? What did you read? What do you know from before? If you didn't read, we only have a short section for you to read, so it's not many pages. It's pretty straightforward, pretty clear, but it should be clear to you. And she has 2, 3, 4 points, and they're not necessarily consistent with one another. But what does she say? 0? Okay, go ahead.
I think like her basic.
Yeah, well, let's begin to you folks who are here, braving the cold weather, pull down your mask, tell us your name, tell us a little bit what city are you from?
I'm from New York.
Okay, New York City. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Go, man, because New York is her big example, so tell us about it. You're tell us a little bit more what you did in New York, what led you to think, what leads you to think about these things now when you say New York? And as a global city, or Wall Street.
New York is obviously viewed like as a melting pot, a very diverse place that draws people from all areas around the world who are interested in all different industries. Like, it's big in tech, it's big in various different industries, finance obviously. So I think with that viewpoint, like, her primary argument is that the more globalized the world economy becomes, the higher agglomeration of like central functions, i.e. economic stuff, in global cities.
Okay, so one point is central, and any term or any way of making it a little more specific in what she says. I mean, let's just elaborate a little more. You've read it, you've thought about it a little bit. So what are her specifics? So central means, what does she say?
I think it's just like functions that are necessary for the rest of the world to function. So, like, we're talking about the stock exchange. That's like an economic industry that you could say powers the rest of the world, even if it's like thousands of miles away or what have you. That's just one example.
Want to add to it?
I don't know if this is the word you're using, but she used the word headquarters a lot, which was kind of what I was noticing. Is that what you were looking for?
Yes, I mean that's That's key, but let's elaborate a little bit more beyond the one word, headquarters. Yeah.
She talks about production a lot and the shift from like the cities that are sort of controlling the world being capitals of like industrial manufacturing towards capitals of production for the new like global control capability, she says.
Okay.
I'm looking on page 7.
Yeah. Two critical words, and you sort of went over them, but you didn't sort of say these are big words.
Yeah.
When you talked about, I mean, central headquarters, then each one of you made it sharper, and that's great. To all of you pay attention as we're getting to to the specifics. Then you added the word production or producer, and she uses a term, she didn't invent this, but she features it. Producer services, what are those? Why does this matter for her? About cities in general, and how are these cities, New York, London, Tokyo, different from Des Moines? Okay, what's a producer service? Anybody have a clue? No. Yes?
Would it be like finance and law and accounting?
Absolutely.
Legal? Yeah.
Yes. Are these for you and me and average people for most of what they do? No. They're for big corporations. At least at least what she stresses and what's critical is that they have they sell a lot of their, at least the big firms, say with 300 lawyers on Wall Street, and try to say, if you want to knock on their door, say, I'm an entrepreneur and I have a new product and I want to sell it in 37 countries. Can you tell me if the laws in those 37 countries would make it harder for me, or how can I focus it to make more money? What kind of taxes would I have to pay? And can you tell me tomorrow? Okay. It takes a big law firm with a lot of expertise to do something like that. So her argument is things like that attract, those producer service firms attract the Wall Street kinds of activities to one another in and around Wall Street. And that's her argument. And the global city has tentacles which are reaching globally, but these producer services like accounting, law, financing, special kinds of financing, AI all over the place with expertise for particular, that is, if you've got all the AI with all those laws, all those tax rates, all these kinds of things, and if you have the right buttons, you know how to do that, then the way I put it, what are my taxes? What's, for an entrepreneur, that kind of thing, you might be able to program with a master's degree in social science from the University of Chicago to do that in less than a minute. Okay. Maybe not, but I'm giving you an example of the kinds of things. This is what she has in mind. Okay. So one is producer services. Headquarters, and you mentioned central. She has a couple of terms, but basically the idea is that the top management people are making big decisions, such as should we sell our cars in five more countries or not? Should we compete within Brazil or not? Should we go to Italy or not? And so the Italians, for example, decided they're not going to sell Fiats in the whole U.S. anymore. Their biggest, the hottest car in Italy, we're giving up. We can't keep up with the Chinese. So the Chinese, or let's say the Chinese and the Asian cars are all over America. We don't see any Fiats. In the 1960s, we had Fiats everywhere. Okay, so just Renaults. So that the European cars, Renault's and the biggest. Okay, so all right, so that kind of decision, big decision, can be informed by people who know about the size of potential markets and marketing. If you're going to do it, how do we advertise? How much would it cost to reach into those markets? Those kinds of things. So these are high level. Okay, then are these just made by people within your General Motors, say? Maybe, but maybe not. The oil companies, General has some high level people, and they got big R&D people. The oil companies do not. The oil as an industry is primarily contracted out. There are hundreds of little corporations, all kinds of firms that have, how do you dig for oil? How do you pump it out? How do you truck it? Do you go for shale? Do you go for water? Do you go on land? And they have people who are experts on all these different kinds of things, and they don't work for one company, even though it's called British Petroleum or SO or something like that. So the point is, these high-level decisions can be improved by contracting out with people who have more expertise. Okay, so it's one, it can be producer services, but two, it can be quasi-management kinds of questions, such as advertising. Okay. She then makes a next step in the argument. These things work better when you think about it and talk with people in person. She said all this before Zoom and before, but basically, and it's probably still significantly true, a lot of these things may be heightened by, I shouldn't overstate that, but that is heightened, at least her argument is, cities, Wall Street area kinds of thing, heighten the ability to have those kinds of conversations and not just have a quick number, but to say, well, this is a big decision, should we sell our cars in Italy or not, in Brazil, or say Brazil or China, if we try to go into China, then what happens with, having those kinds of questions means having differentiated expertise globally, and adding in person. So that is, if you want to have it in person, you want to have people in the same city, and not just having contract out with an advertising company in Des Moines. So therefore, it hurts the Des Moines and those kind of people, she argues, leads to at least the high-level people doing that, or people who want to do this in a global way. They ought to be concentrated more in London than in Birmingham. Okay, so we're getting to central, headquarters, management, contracting out, personal relationships. These are her arguments. She then next gets to the inequality piece. That's trickier. Why does that work? Yes.
So she sort of goes into how these global cities are, they're concentrated with services that cater to global capital, and how that attracts highly skilled workers who come to these areas, but it also attracts lower wage workers to work in those jobs. So these places breed the pay disparities and these new forms of inequality.
Okay. Yes. In terms of in terms of exactly matching these two variables, globalization, inequality. Let's add more, however, a little more specifics. Let's begin to unpack, and that's what we're going to do in these next lines. But let's not. Before we get to that, let's just sort of say, what are the intervening steps? One thing which she has, one part of the income inequality is that Wall Street people get paid more. Why are they paid more than Detroit if you're doing automobiles? And if Detroit has some headquarter people in New York and some people in Detroit, who's going to be in which city and why? Okay. Well, yeah. Does she have an answer, and is it consistent with what she'd said so far? And yes, I'd say it's consistent, but what does it come that we've heard about on Monday? Which theory and which core idea drove the center of our discussion on Monday? It's Adam Smith. Okay, Adam Smith's pure market, assuming, at least the way it gets more articulated now, freedom of entry, perfect information, lots of competition, then we get efficient supply and demand curves, and as it gets bigger, as the extent of the market grows, then we have more traded globally through stock markets, stock exchanges, in futures markets, that's insurance and so forth. Okay, how do these where and how who are the people in those firms? Are they, you said, intelligent, talented people general, but more specifically, what's their knowledge? What professional expertise do they have that lead them to get paid more? This is Sassoon's argument. What's she say?
I was just gonna say, I don't know, like business savvy or
Business savvy's too vague. What kind of business savvy? Yeah.
Well, like graduate education for lawyers and
No, that's too vague in general. I mean, why on Wall Street? You may have top lawyers in Des Moines or St. Louis. Why are they on Wall Street? Okay, the answer is Adam Smith. Extent of the market. How does that fit with Sassoon?
these markets are very expensive.
Yeah, with my example, General Motors wants to sell certain kinds of cars in Brazil or not. I mean, the extent of the market, and then if we're thinking of that, we need someone in their head or their cell phone or their app which can help them answer, how is the extent of the market? And if that's a bigger market, then let's at the other end of the continuum in terms of pay, taking care of children or driving a taxi for people who you can pick up on one street and drive to another street in Manhattan. Those are very local markets. You got to be flagged by that taxi or by an Uber that's nearby. So I'm giving you the pieces. How do you put the two pieces together of Smith and Sassoon? And what explains the high pay? I'm answering halfway. The high pay of Wall Street people.
well, the workers in these producer services, their clientele, they're basically catering to the world, to the globe, compared to people in smaller industries with a more local extent of the market, and therefore their pay is lower.
Exactly. Is this original to Sassoon? No, this is Adam Smith. So part of Sassoon is directly taken from Adam Smith. That part. She also then has a corollary that the middle managers in places like Des Moines or Detroit or wherever where they make some parts like transmissions and then they sell them and they put them in the cars and they assemble them in Detroit or wherever else in Mexico City, small town. That is the simple point is for her, the middle managers get squeezed out and they are replaced by global talent and higher level expertise as the top management decisions are moved to a global city. And so that is the smartest people either within GM in this example or other people who advise get paid big fees and these lead to higher. So this is that part of the, so the argument is not did they go to Ivy League colleges or not? No, it's do they know about how you access the car market in Brazil in that example. And that expertise is global, global knowledge and abilities to handle it creatively in an entrepreneurial way that it will make more money, reach more markets, or whatever. or that is, or to have more information about, let's add it one step further. Might we try to extend our market of General Motors cars to Brazil or not? And for sure, we're not going to go to Italy, compete with Ferrari and Fiat. Oh, no, but they okay. So okay. So we're getting pieces of Sassan's argument, and then we're going to decompose some of this. We're going to look at some intervening steps. That is, we've got there's some high-end people paid because of Wall Street, used as a simple term, for global expertise. Then at the low end, there are people who are sophisticated, let's say, you said not sophisticated, yeah, sophisticated, but you made the point, cosmopolitan, international, global, coming from many places around the world, but especially in New York, they're from Latin America, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, Mexico, etc., El Salvador. These countries have had a lot of expertise in New York, and they've usually started out at these lower end. Okay, how about if we have one or two more to show where and why these are not simply the fact that they speak Spanish. How about Miami? How's that different in this way as a city? Why is New York different from this label of, say, Des Moines? In terms of this dynamic. Who have been the mayors of Miami, or I could even add as well. No, let's just stay with Miami. I'm using deliberately looking for outliers from the normal pattern. So Sassan's telling us the normal pattern. I'm looking for an outlier to help to sharpen our analysis or ways of seeing why it doesn't fit. And for Miami, there's been a lot of work by people working on migration and so forth in Miami, okay. The mayors have been from Cuba. The top political people, the top finance people often have been from Cuba. Why?
Well, on some level, like, a lot of people who fled Cuba are more interested in, like, capitalism and production-based, like, economies, and so once they get to the U.S., they embrace, or at least more.
Once they get, why did they come here? Why did they leave Cuba?
Well, in large part for asylum. For asylum, I mean, you know.
How about 30 years earlier when they
30 years before cash, or what? 30 years.
Who were the political? What was the political system in Cuba compared to Puerto Rico?
I mean, communist. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. That is, there were some Marxist leaders. Fidel Castro. Ever hear of him? Okay. Castro led to lots of people saying, I'm leaving Cuba. Those are now in Miami, or their grandchildren or children are. Okay, that is, were these poor people who just wanted to drive a taxi? No. These were the top people, especially in finance and business and so forth, who left Cuba and who are also mayors now in Miami. The elite went to Miami, and in 1917, when Lenin took power in Russia, a lot of talented people went to Berlin and Paris and London from Russia. Okay, and they developed ballet, they developed music, they developed Highland. Okay, lots of things. Okay, so my point is, if we're looking at cities, the global local processes, these dynamics vary contingent on where people are from. Okay, so in this sense, and the dynamic now of inequality is contingent, we can say, is that the dynamic. So one answer is Adam Smith. Bigger market, better start of the market. You have a high income there. But at the lower end, we have people who may be taxi drivers, but but it may be that some of the people in Miami, it's a different model in the sense that they came there, that is, they may be Cuban, but they're at they some are taxi drivers, but they're also people at high ends. Okay, we're trying to look at dynamics of inequality of income, basically. Okay, I'm filling in a couple of blocks. So we're having Spanish speaking perhaps, but if we look at, this is not on the reading list, but I'm adding it here. If you look at a chapter in Sassen's book called Consumption, how does consumption work in her model? Okay, you probably haven't looked at it, but take a look at it tomorrow or the next day when you think about it. And the simple answer is basically in one word: consumption is the same as production, or that is, the production dynamic is such that it drives the consumer. So so if you're a Wall Street banker, of course you have a chauffeur who drives you down to Wall Street. Of course you have a nanny who takes care of your kids. The mother doesn't have to do it all herself. Maybe a cook or a chef, or maybe then in the food areas, we've got some high-end people who make really good pastry, and they may be so they work in high-end places, but that is there are lots of people who are the pastry cooks who are not paid at high levels. They are the demand for more services that are local. That is, the pastries are not sold globally; they're sold, in the upper part of Manhattan. Okay, so these dynamics of high-end consumption, which she's talking about, may be heightened by, at least in the text, you have to have a chauffeur, you have to have a nanny, you have to have this. If you think about it, okay, so this, let's say this is this from Adam Smith? No. This comes from where? Okay, this is a big question, and we're getting to the second half of the markets and so forth. This is the global capitalism Lenin Marxist tradition, which says inequality is driven by class conflict. It's the capitalists versus the proletarians. These are proletarians, and proletarians need to unite and have a revolution. Okay, so this is the resonance that Sassen, having lived a little bit and growing up and living in Argentina and other places in Latin America herself, she has this, and this is part of what made her have an appeal, that she could both talk to the Wall Street people and the revolutionary people. Inequality. Okay, but if the driver is the money, is it just money? That is, what's that leaving out? Okay, it's early in the course, we haven't talked about it, but we'll get to a lot more. But what I'm pointing out to it, even here, it's a critical part. The labor, what say the economists will talk about labor force. Okay, the labor force having pastry chefs and chauffeurs, and that's the low end. But the reason those get hired in New York in larger numbers, especially high-end, I'd say Wall Street kinds of people, is because they choose to have a chauffeur. That is, you can it's probably faster to take a subway than it is to take a chauffeur all the way down to Wall Street if you live on the Upper East Side. Okay. But let's unpack one or two other, not just theories combined with examples and models and different sorts of data. Okay, let's flash forward to say, or flash, whatever, to what was the leading place for theorizing ideologically about how might this kind of dynamic work, let's say in the late 60s when the student revolutions were going on, 1968 in Paris and Farragut, Columbia, Berkeley. Who were their best theorists from? Frankfurt, Germany. And I went there as a student. I saw the leading people there, and then the two of them were called Adorno and Horkheimer, Adorno, Theodor Adorno and Max Horkheimer. Later on, their student Habermas. Okay, Habermas in the early days sort of followed that, but he was always making it more subtle. Okay, but Adorno and Horkheimer gave a lecture when I was there. I was amazed. You people were here and you felt the boot of Hitler. It was bad stuff here. Horkheimer and I went to America and we saw it was worse because those people had to have these big cars, they smoked lots of cigarettes, they had ice cream and things that were sloppy, bad taste. That is, the implicit driver was intervening here was, that is, he's also talking about America as a center of global capitalism, implicit here. It's not that it is. There are lots of papers, but one of the most famous is on Hollywood, Adorno and Horkheimer. They were in New York for a couple of weeks, and they went to Hollywood. Okay, so they have examples, especially from Warner Brothers, the big movie firms, and would even say the taste we have of what kind of films we have is just what Sam Warner wants of these movies. We're being this is forced down our throats to have this kind of propaganda implicitly. And it's a lifestyle, and then it may have attractive young women in it to try to attract you in, and therefore you want to go to those movies, you want to pay. In those days, those film companies in the early to mid 30s, they owned a lot of these movie houses in hundreds of little towns across America. Then the national government said this is too much of a monopoly, and they had to sell off the local movie houses. But it looked a little more the way Adorno and Horkheimer were talking about it. We're trying to look at the causal linkages which they're positing from capital to big film companies like Warner Brothers, to Sam Warner himself in terms of what's in the film, which films get approved or disapproved, which ones get promoted or not, which ones are advertised a lot or not. These kinds of decisions were global capitalistic decisions driven by advertising, marketing, and interrelated processes, posited as part of neo-Marxist interpretation. The attractive faces and legs would be from Freud, which they explicitly would talk about. Other things can be added to that is they're getting as well. That's why it's important to say consumption. That is, they in the 20th century they tried to move from just production to add consumption, and so the key driver to make it Marxist was what I'm giving you these examples: advertising, big money capitalist driver kinds of decisions, which get down to the consumer. And the reason you buy or you go to that movie or you buy a car that is a more expensive car or having a car at all, because advertising told you so. And therefore it was, and how strong is it really operating on average American citizens? It's worse than Hitler. That's their theory. In this today, you look at courses. I teach a course called Culture. You look at that. We looked up what are the main readings of culture in the U.S. today. This paper by Adorno and Horkheimer. The students around the U.S. are still reading this. This is the way it works. And it came in part from people in English, German, French, Italian language departments where they teach more of this kind of stuff too. Okay, they did, that has changed, but I'll say it was within sociology, political science, anthropology, these battles were also going on, but in the late 60s, and especially in France, with people like Pierre Bourdieu linking with the Adorno people, they made the same kind of argument. Hand up.
What parts of Hitler is it, I guess, worse than? Like his fascism, his state control of media? Like what elements of like Hitler's regime in specifically was, I guess, American media worse than? What was their argument?
Yeah. No democracy. You kill off the communists, you gas the Jews, and the people in nearby countries get invaded. And so in Hungary, Czech Republic, all the way over to Russia. And so, I mean, the big war for the Germans was really the Eastern Front, fighting with the Eastern Europe, but especially the Russians. That was their tough war. And so, I mean, in the sense, military violence, in domestic, in terms of within Germany, Hitler's boot was not just international, but among Germans. So the former active groups in the 1920s and 30s, communists, street activists, or just general democratic political activists. I mean, they left, or they died, or they went underground if they could. Intervening things, newspapers, taking them over, publishing houses, which books could be published, appointments of professors at universities. If you were Jewish, you'd leave. And so I've sometimes said, what's one of the strongest reasons that the American university is so strong? Adolf Hitler. Okay. With the data we have working with Germans and the German social scientists, as well as the people in the raw data where we've gone to our meetings, they've had since the 1930s fantastic data that the German cities have been collected since 1933 about the number of people taking buses, getting to work on motorcycles or not. That maybe, I'm not sure if they have this, but you do have in what books or which books are not permitted to be bought or sold or burned if they were in their libraries. So that is control of information, which was critical of the Nazis. Basically, would be domestic aspects. You know, I'm sure they're when I was in a youth hostel in Germany one time, when a bus showed up with kids, let's say around 15 to 18, and when they came in, there was a sort of a comic or a magazine that had something about Hitler on it, and they all wanted to run over and look. That is, after 1945, this was seen as so horrible. This was the Holocaust. This was, and so forth. Clearly, we have this in New York and in the U.S., but within Germany, there was such clamping down, such guilt among Germans. Why do you have to say? Okay, so then another link right here to Sassen's theory, to your point. Where do these people come from in what we're having in another week or so? Trump. What's the big issue? There's a big picture of, I think it's the Economist magazine, has a Statue of Liberty at the base, and on top there is Donald Trump with his finger pointed away with his red hat on, saying, "Get out," So that is why this policy over immigration, and how might it work in terms of the dynamic of the Sassen globalization leading to inequality dynamic. Okay, we're looking through here which people migrate there, contrasting with Miami, but well, I don't want to spend too much time just on domestic German. I mean, I think I've given you a quick answer of the boot. The boot was the one word. The boot was the idea of violence, control, anti-democratic. No criticism of Hitler. But then the implicit idea was it's so bad that advertising sharpens, or is so sharp that it destroys our minds to make individual decisions, and therefore capitalism is forcing the economy to work this way. Okay, so if Adorno and Horkheimer make this sharp and clear, and there's still some people who ideologically will use this as saying, Sassen has picked that up, and so does she cite Marx? Does she cite Lenin? Does she cite Adorno and Horkheimer? No, not at all. She talks about this as sort of, people who work in Wall Street kinds of jobs, then they have to have chauffeurs. You have to have nannies. You have to have pastry. Okay, but if we then unpack that and say, are you sure that you have to have a nanny or a chauffeur when it might be faster to take the subway? Maybe that is we'll cover this a little more when we go into the course, but the simple point is, or let me make another example that maybe make more obvious. You go to McDonald's, or let's say fast food more generally, fast food places. What did they serve in their food, and is it healthy or not? Okay, so the health food activists have gone to McDonald's leaders and said, are you using chickens and beef that are treated in humane manner or not? And if you just have chickens that are kept in little tight cages, that's bad. Whereas if instead if they were able to be out and more free ranging chickens, something of that sort, then so McDonald's has then changed their food to respond to those kinds of concerns. Or put it, that is, the criticism leading there in that direction, that is at least the people who said you should do this more, and you should change, you should not serve things which are bad, and so the McDonald's people initially said, we're not forcing it down anybody's throats. You can buy it if you want. If you don't want it. We post there all the ingredients, and we will. And so if people don't want to buy it, and so that was their first answer. People said, but people don't know all that enough, and therefore you're forcing it down their throats, and therefore global capitalism, or big firms are forcing this down, and they don't have any choice. Okay, so this is, like I said, then let's open this a little bit more here. Where and how might this change? So I gave you the example of animal rights people, but how about people who try to want to help? Are there? How can we? What I'm adding here, I'm adding a big variable now, and I'm doing this in conjunction with this, but because it's important for the big theories as well as policy and so forth. Information, and who has what information and how much, such as with AI, taking to a new extreme. With your, you can look stuff up on your cell phone, etc. I gave you the example on Monday of the business of how what's the key finance theories of how the stock market works. It's no longer just go to the Merrill Lynch broker. Instead, we've got fancy, elaborated models of people like Fava here, Merton at Harvard, on random walk. That is, if you have if you have the big prices of the price being set by big actors who trade at Wall Street, these are reasonably efficient markets. But okay, I'll just leave that for now and say that's the core Chicago model of the efficient market for finance. A corollary of this has been developed more at other places at Princeton and Yale, especially the Yale people for 20 years. I mean, Yale made more money for Yale than anybody else in the they were way ahead of Chicago and Harvard and so forth for a couple of years. So then the others began to follow them, and so the idea was, let's not invest in what everybody knows at Wall Street. Let's look for things where there's not so good information. Let's look for small markets. Let's look for bonds that are. And so let's get as well. I want to add to make the point that this is urban global local politics. Now I've taught for several years a course called Urban Public Finance. Okay, bond markets. The bond markets and the prices for small school boards in a small town in Texas, there's nothing, if you're in Wall Street, you don't know anything about it. Okay, so therefore there can be a potential way of buying below a price that it might be if there were more information. So such as after the New York fiscal crisis, the widespread word, amazing, was don't buy any bonds from any city east of the Mississippi. Any city east of the Mississippi, they're going to influence so much by New York and by that irresponsible finance of Abraham Beam and those people for in New York. Therefore, only buy bonds in California, Wyoming, Nevada, and so forth. And so for the prices, so you have to pay more if you're a city, and this in fact something like this you could see in the data. That is, the prices of these things would go up or down based on bad information. And so bad information in the sense that east-west of the Mississippi ain't very sophisticated way of analyzing local governments, or where to invest, or what kind of risk are you actually taking by putting your. So okay, so one example then is is the investing strategies such as featured by the Yale people initially, but then spreading that with hedge funds. So hedge funds doing this. I'm naming these because, well, in the books published by the Yale folks, would say these are good things if you're a university where you've got a lot of money and you've got smart people coming to you with a new venture, a new way that you can make some money. But if you're an average person, let's say, just $1 million or two, and you're no more than that or anybody less, don't waste your time. You've got to have lots of information, a lot of subtlety, and it won't work. So if you just got, and so I'm looking at alternative mechanisms that say that within the finance area, so-called index funds. What's an index fund? Everybody know or not? Okay, an index fund is something like the broad, simpler idea would be a mutual fund, but then there are other things with different names, but basically an index fund will be something you can buy, which will be an exact replica of the of all the holdings of let's say either everything in the New York Stock Exchange, or it could be the Dow Jones index, or it could be the 500 largest Schwab, or the 100 largest, or it may be, then they could be industry specific, like the computer industry or the automobile industry or the oil industry, or that is, if you do want to invest more, or if you want to say, I want to invest in green power, I want to invest in solar panels, I want to say, and I don't want to, so they're green funds. You want to invest your money all there, or you want to say in turn, we don't want to let any of the University of Chicago money be invested in any country that we are, that is involved in fighting in the Middle East with or against Israel now. This is now a demand, for example. That is, these kinds of things. So my quick point is, there are many funds which now appeal to investors. Okay, so if you want, that's the investor path. How about the general consumer, the average citizen, the average voter? So who are the okay, what's happened since the 1930s and so forth? To counter marketing and advertising. Think of an institutions. Who's helping the average? If you want to get a car, you want to get a new computer, want to get a washing machine, what kind should you buy? What kind of computer? What kind of washing machine? What kind of car? What kind of tires? Where do you go for that? If you do you just walk in and say, I'll buy what's cheapest or the most expensive, depending what you feel? Does anybody help you? Yeah.
Advertising, so.
No, that comes from that's Adorno's theory. Who counters that? Ever heard of Consumers Reports or Consumers Magazine? Okay, what's Consumers Reports?
They like evaluate the quality of a product when they publish it to the general public.
There we go. So you can buy, in the old days you could buy the magazine, you subscribe to it. Now it's all online. So you have 200 kinds of humidifiers. You can check, right now everybody's shopping for humidifiers. There are hundreds of them out here. Okay, they've been tested and ranked in terms of, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So Consumers Reports, and then there are all kinds of, and so this is really this is the high-end, high-quality version, but there are lots of people who are sort of implying that they do the same thing. They may in fact be not very, they may be just sloppy, but they also may be funded by, General Motors if it's cars, something like that. So my point is, there are many or social media discussions about how to take care of your car or how to buy a car. I mean, that these things, that is, even if you don't want to read this all the time, you can look it up when you want to have it. So these kinds of things are there. When you get to things that are really, say, women's clothes, shopping, these sorts of things. There's tons of information. Women's magazines on lifestyle, home, how to, and not only to make it better, but also make it more make it efficient, and to help the consumer buy products that are niche products, but which will save you money over getting the normal ways of making pancakes. There are tons of stuff like this now, heightened by the internet. Okay, so these sorts of things have changed and weakened the positive, simple, causal model that Adorno, Horkheimer, Marx, and Sasson use. Okay, got the point? You're not shaking your head as if either you're doubting or you don't hear the. You see that these are two competing mechanisms. Either it's just marketing and advertising, and you buy the car because it's been advertised, and you say yes, or say I've read the reviews and Cadillac really fell way below Lincoln now, or Mercedes versus Cadillac versus other imported Lexus and so forth. So they're Japanese and imported cars that are competing with Cadillac that may do better than in terms of, so all these kinds of, at the other end, cheap, simple, used cars. There are all kinds of fancy used cars. 3 years, so they have tests. They do Consumers Reports. Owners of these Mercedes, they've had them for 7 years. How many accidents have they had? How many broken? And how often is the engine broken down? These kinds of things are all measured and reported and published. Okay, aren't these things that you know about, or is this? You're not shaking your head as if you never done this? Yeah.
So I get how the internet helps democratize information and help the consumer, I guess, be more informed and make better purchasing decisions. But at the same time, the internet also enables producers to manipulate the consumer with advertising, etc.
Yes.
How do we like transpose those ideas to the impacts of like globalism? Like where does that sort of idea fit in the context of globalism?
Good question. It is, I mean, I think the one sentence answer is we're gonna cover this in the rest of the course, and we're gonna look at these other kinds of linkages, such as voting, such as civic groups, such as new social movements, the political cultures of different regions and of countries. So so I'll at this, I think probably given the amount of time and the things we ought to I should say, let's focus. I'm mentioning the topics, which are blocks of variables, which are important in answering that, which we will be talking about in the next few weeks. But my point is, in introducing them, maybe too briefly, I'm saying they're there and they're important, and I'm not to say that they swamp the advertising. These are, in this the way I've set it up, perhaps these are two competing currents of causal modeling, and they're in conflict, and these are highly picked up by ideological critics, or by people who want to defend or bring in other variables like nationalism, or let's say, don't sell U.S. steel to the Japanese because the Japs are unreliable, etc. So these kinds of things with their ideological overlaps, but I would say in terms of research, these are challenging questions for social science to try to say how strong are these causal arrows and how can we measure them, and that's tricky. There are departments called communications. They used to be called journalism, but now they're called communication. They include a lot of this internet kind of stuff, and AI. So one guy finishing a master's degree here in social science, in computational social science, is going to a PhD in information, not sociology, not economics, going so they have this kind of expertise is now interpenetrating other areas of it to try. So I'm giving you a flash forward to simply say these are serious research questions, and they're tricky, but we're getting better and better and better research methods and data. University of Chicago put out a memo yesterday who said AI is really a big issue, and this university really should and will put into much more attention, organizations, financing, to make AI help go further in different fields across from medicine, biology, physics, and all the way to the humanities. Okay. All right, so information. I've talked with the potential there of how and why these causal arrows are not as clear as the Adorno, Horkheimer, Hitler's boot story, or the debates with, let's say, people around McDonald's as examples here. And where else? I mean, this comes out when we have, say, well, most visibly, this is excellent timing. It's right in the press right now. The people who were there, who were appointed under Biden and who are being kicked out, the deep state is going to be fought out and looked for by the Trump people. We want to find these deep state people. If they're in Washington, we're going to find out where, and we're going to move that agency out of Washington altogether. We'll get rid of those people. At the same time, then we've got different kinds of people with the Trump administration. The Silicon Valley big firms and the small firm entrepreneurial kinds of, and those are different ways of potentially handling information. And that is, I'm making the point that we've got discussions which are not just ideology, but they're also political. And then say Musk. Musk is being featured a lot right now. What kind of information is he bringing in, and where and why? I mean, that is, there are many different conflicting kinds of handling this, but and all over the world, the world, I mean, people, the Europeans especially, are going wild trying to figure out, you know, what are they, or the, how should we adapt to that or those policies, for instance, and we've got huge divisions now going on, and new elections are about to be held in Germany, Italy, or Germany and France especially, and nobody has a majority, and you've got people who are shouting on these same kinds of issues as I'm talking to you about right now. So these are not subtle, hidden, you know, under the table kinds of topics. These are front page newspaper stuff, especially with the Europeans, but here. Okay, so I'm not to suggest just read the newspaper. I'm simply saying a lot of people are concerned about these issues in ways that these can be explicitly laid out, analyzed, whether you're a supporter of Trump or a critic of Trump, a supporter of Musk, or et cetera. But then going beyond those names, and that's the big point I made last time as well. Remember, as we'll use it again, issue specificity. What Trump is no longer traditional, quote, left or right. He's doing things which are a mixture, and they're tricky. And so you've got people, and so for instance, okay, I won't elaborate more. So let me go over here. I got one or two points to look at here. Let's go through these things, these guys. Here, so we got the simple Sasson theory at the top. The second line, G leads to I leads to inequality. So if you have more inequality, and we have more inequality in terms of income in the U.S. than we do in Europe, and then we do, especially say in Eastern Europe, East European residue of the communist tradition, and I would even add, say, Japan. Japan has much more. There's much more equality among incomes than at the U.S. Okay, so what do we have as an alt, or why isn't it higher and higher and higher? One answer is the inequality leads to so a Wall Street demonstration. So a few years ago, it was initially in Wall Street, and it's then spread to cities around the world. And there were 200 or so across the U.S. We had one in Chicago, but then other cities around the world. Anti-inequality demonstrations. The top 1% of the American citizens in terms of income own something like half of all the stock. I'm not quite sure if how valid that number is, but that kind of thing is brought forth. Okay, so if we have people talking about this, saying we want to change this, this leads to what? The next line, line 3, globalization may lead to, and now we have two paths. One path could lead to inequality. The second can lead to anti-inequality policies, which maybe have spurred based on the past, leading to inequality, but it may lead to reduction of those inequalities by having affirmative action, of hiring people who may be minorities, women, immigrants, who we will try to lean over and give them, when in doubt, more positions for them, more promotions and so forth, than others. And in that way, these kinds of policies can lead to less inequality, at least is the argument. So path A and path B. So path A can be more knowledge about the ways that these can work, can lead to, and then who are the drivers? What leads to A or B leading to information of this sort? The far left parties versus the far right parties. They can each claim at least that their paths are stronger, and say, if you elect me as Trump, we will do this, and we will have more growth in the income, and growth in the economy for everybody. And American workers, I mean, that's a key point of that Trump would talk about, every other sentence. I'm helping the American worker. Okay, not the capitalists, just capitalist workers. And so in terms of, and so the linkage there was, we don't want all these foreign immigrants. I mean, the first sentence that was so inflammatory, which put on the screen of everybody was, Mexicans who are coming in here are rapists. And no top American political leader had ever said, I would say had ever been publicized, picked up by, making that kind of ridiculously, I shouldn't say ridiculous, that is, but the average American would say, this is ridiculous, extreme, overstated, but we still have a fair amount of this kind of feeling circulating right now. Okay, and then standing up with the Statue of Liberty, of kicking out, and the Germans have okay, I won't try to get to German, but just to say, we've got, on the one hand, the Germans had the anti-Hitler residue of the earlier prime minister, so we really want to be welcoming to immigrants from foreign places in the world. We don't want to say we're just racist Northern European white-faced Caucasians. We want to welcome Moroccans, Turks, and so forth, and they can work in German factories and they can become Germans and so forth. All right, so that in turn is now leading to anti-immigrant parties in Germany and within France, and in places like and where they've had elections at the local level. And murders. I mean, murders by political candidates in Rotterdam, for instance, was a big scandal. Okay, then the fourth line here, in terms of where and how much these dynamics work, is other variables. These kinds of things, globalization, inequality. There are a lot of other things going on, and I brought these in my examples of taking in Miami, taking in Des Moines. That is, and so and then most of all, your question about how do these other things work and how do they link to the rest of globalization is what we will be doing more in the rest of the weeks of the course. But my point is, these all undermine Sassen's simple path at the top. I won't say necessarily refute or wrong, but simply say we need to have better evidence to be able to say how strong are these other paths. So for instance, when I was teaching with Saskia, I would say, you're not saying anything about government. Wall Street doesn't make these decisions in ways that affect everybody in all of our lives. How about the mayors? How about the unions? How about the city council members and so forth? And she said, well, so first example was, that's too complicated. The second answer after a couple of years was, yes, I agree. And then she had a new book, and she's done that. So she's written later books later on, which are much more openly political. Third, I mean, her was in part analysis, but also a lot of intervening between the lines, sort of ideological, moral overtones of it's a violation of equality or it's a violation of universalism if we do that. Okay, so but my point is, if not, this is not just about one person. If we look at all of social science, there's a whole lot of social science doing all these things. So my simple point is let's not leave this to one book or one simple theory, which is the first line. Let's use, and that's the whole rationale for this course, is that we want to look at where and how these strong subfields within the social sciences, which feed into about voting, political parties, political culture, new social movements, and so forth, how do they work, and how do they connect to these processes? And they all do, which we'll explain in the next weeks. Okay. I mean, let me ask you, should I have paused more, or I mean, maybe I should have asked you this 30 minutes ago perhaps. That is, we've answered in part because of the cold weather, but usually those folks who are here, if you are here, if you think you'd like to be able to talk more and have more participation, as we did in the second class, the whole second class was just participation pretty much of you here, Q&A. We can do more if you want. So I'm asking right now, does anybody have any question? But more generally, I'm asking, would you folks at least say what your thoughts, either personally or whatever, should we have more participation in these sessions, such as right now, or does anybody want to ask a question or comment on that? Please do. That's what I was afraid of. Okay, I'm not, let me wait for 1 minute. Wouldn't anybody like to comment? Question, yes.
Yeah, I kind of like it.
Well, why don't you, can you pull your mask down and tell us a little more? It's fun to elaborate, because you had some great questions on that second. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Lucas, but with a K.
Okay, Lucas?
And yeah, I kind of like an even balance between like, you know, letting us speak and then also the lecturers. You know, I don't like, you know, like when it's like too much of like us just like talking, like sort of like the whole Q&A section. But I also don't like, you know, like when it's like entirely lecture. So I think like an even balance would make it, you know, enjoyable.
Okay. Anyone else who would want to comment on that? Yes.
Yeah, I would agree. I really like when there's some more discussion in class. But I also like hearing some anecdotes and things from your lecture about like contemporary examples of what we're reading in application. I think having like students share some more of that too could be good. Like there's in the SASN when we were talking about the like low wage workers also sort of coming in droves into these like new globalized cities. Like that made me start to think about like, okay, what was the impact of the COVID pandemic, which, you know, caused a bunch of like highly skilled workers to start working from home, and so then you don't need as many like blue collar workers to be doing upkeep on the buildings where people used to be working if they're now working completely remotely. And so the you know, how we might be able to extend or change the SASN based on those more recent events that are impacting the world that we now live in today, that I guess wasn't there when this was written.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Anyone else? Our New York representative, any thoughts?
Yeah, I concur. I think like you obviously have a wide breadth of knowledge and experience on the topic, so it's great to hear what you have to say. We also have a bunch of diverse experiences growing up in various places, so I think it's nice hearing from our peers as well.
Okay. So this is useful. So I'll try to build in both discussion during the not just at the end, but that is as we've had some good, we've tried to have some questions along the way, you know, probably 10 plus times today, and we've had some very good points raised, such as starting with centralization, headquarters, production, and so forth. And so I'll try to do a little bit more of that, but and I went to Bowdoin College myself. I mean, if you go to a small liberal arts college with 4 students, 6 students, and that's what you expect all the time, I would say the best classes as an undergraduate myself, which I had, were in Frankfurt and Paris, where we had world-class geniuses, and 1,000 people in a class and never any questions. Okay, so I would say those are the best courses I ever had. With those were big lecture courses. But I'm comfortable and teach courses, and I've done both, and especially when we get to things like workshops, when they're heavily student participation oriented. Okay, good folks. We will go ahead next week.